I'm Sarah, just your everyday single mom doing her best to raise 2 kids. I like to believe I've done everything I can for my wonderful children, but sometimes, well, things don't always go as planned. I've got 2 kids, my oldest Nate and his younger sister Isabella. I've pretty much been their only parent since my husband passed away when they were very young. He suddenly collapsed one day, and despite the doctors doing their absolute best, he didn't pull through. The loss was gut-wrenching at first, but then I'd look at my 2 little ones. Seeing their innocent faces, I thought to myself, I can't quit now, can I? Thankfully, we had my husband's savings to fall back on, and my parents chipped in financially too. Plus, we got some help from the government. All of that gave me a little nudge towards a brighter future. But as the years rolled by, things began to shift, particularly when Nate hit junior high. He started wanting more, constantly asking me to buy him stuff. I couldn't indulge him all the time, and when I tried to teach him some patience, he'd snap back with a, "Why not? All my friends have it." Next thing you know, he'd go radio silent on me, treating me like I was the bad guy. Sure, it could have just been typical teenager angst, but it was tough to handle. Eventually, I gave in to his requests. It made him happier, and it put my mind at ease. After all, I had a job, and we weren't splurging on luxury items, so we had some wiggle room financially. I figured it would be harder to see him left out just because I forced him to go without, so I caved a little and fulfilled some of his whims. However, as Nate moved through high school and into college, his requests ramped up. The amount he wanted kept climbing. $5 turned into $50, and by his senior year in college, he was hitting me up for $700. That's when I had to intervene. Why on earth do you need so much money? This is way beyond what you used to ask for. Then Nate got all defensive and blurted out,
"What? Isn't it obvious? My girlfriend wants a designer bag and I'm going to buy it for her."
I was taken aback. I had no clue he even had a girlfriend, let alone why a college student would need a designer bag. But when I shared my thoughts with him, he fired back.
"Quit nagging. It's the norm. Get with the times."
I was on the verge of tears. Did I screw up raising him? Just then, my daughter Isabella, who'd been watching this whole debacle, stepped in. "If you're so keen on buying your girlfriend a gift, why not get a part-time job and earn your own cash? Any girl who expects her boyfriend to fork out for designer bags can't be all that great." Indeed, unlike Nate, Isabella has always been an overachiever. She's been working part-time since high school and earning her own money, and she's still at it. She even tells me things like, "I don't need an allowance because I have my part-time gig." She's such a gem. She got into a top high school and is now at a promising university. But Nate? His grades have been nothing short of dismal, and I've heard he's been stirring up trouble at school. The high school and college he attended were, well, let's just say they weren't exactly selective about their students. Because Nate had this knack for mooching money off me and wasn't the politest of the bunch, his relationship with his sister wasn't exactly rosy. They were apples and oranges, and it showed. So when his sister gave him a piece of her mind, he didn't hold back.
"Shut up. It's not your place to talk. Quit acting like the golden child. It's driving me nuts."
He practically shouted those words at her, and then he laid into me.
"So what's your plan, huh? Are you okay if your darling son can't spoil his girlfriend?"
He was really pushing my limits. I guess I should have pushed back, but the thought of his life spiraling made me feel sympathetic. In the end, I caved in yet again. "All right, but this is the last time. I can't keep shelling out $700 like it's pocket change. I'm not made of money, you know." I handed him the cash, making him swear it was the final time. Nate was all smiles, but he didn't even bother to say thank you. I was left feeling uneasy, but if this could help him smooth things over with his girlfriend, that's the thought I clung to. Nate was on the brink of graduating college and landing a job. He claimed he had one lined up. I figured once he started earning a paycheck, he'd quit asking me for handouts. But, as it turns out, my hopes were misplaced. Sure, he did graduate and snagged a job, which was a plus, but he started trickling in later and later at night. It's one thing if he's out late for work-related drinks, but sometimes he wasn't back till sunrise. "What in the world keeps you out so late?" I inquired, concerned.
Huh? Just chilling at my girlfriend's place,
Was all Nate would offer. He's an adult, so I really shouldn't poke my nose in. But as days turned into weeks, he was coming home less and less. When I asked why, he said,
My girlfriend wants me to crash at her place. She lives alone. Quit prying.
Maybe I was fretting too much. I just wished I could meet this mysterious girlfriend at least once. As I mulled that over, a few months flew by. Nate called, which was unusual in itself.
We've decided to get married. We'll be dropping by together.
He sounded different, in a good sort of way. Upon hearing that, I felt a sense of pride. Nate was maturing. He was ready to start a family. I felt a wave of joy and agreed to meet them. A few hours later, Nate and his girlfriend popped over. But on setting eyes on her, I was taken aback. She seemed to be trying a tad too hard to look young with thick makeup. "Hi, pleasure to meet you. I'm Naomi." She greeted me so casually. Was she really here to introduce herself as the future wife of my son? I couldn't help but question her demeanor. I wouldn't exactly say I was overjoyed. My daughter Isabella, who was also home, seemed at a loss for words. Then without much preamble, Nate turned to me and said,
So, we're planning a honeymoon and need some cash.
He said it with such a matter-of-fact face. But I was flabbergasted and took a moment to process his words. The first thing that popped into my mind was, "Did you guys file the marriage license with the city office?" Nate just shrugged.
Marriage license? We can handle that later. We're getting hitched anyway.
He didn't seem to think it was a big deal. I suppose if they were both on board, it wasn't an issue. My next question was, "Where's your family from, Naomi? If we're talking marriage, I should meet them." And she replied, "I lost my parents early on, so I don't really have a family home." She said it with such enthusiasm. I felt guilty for asking, but also thought she could tone down the cheeriness. I had a ton more questions for her, but before I could open my mouth, Nate cut in.
Who cares? Just fork over the money already.
He was rushing me. But it's not as easy as just lending money, I explained, laying out how much I'd already poured into Nate over the years. You both have jobs now. Why not live within your means? Honestly, it was a bit bold of them to drop the marriage news and then immediately hit me up for honeymoon cash. It was a breach of good manners, to say the least. They should bear a bit more responsibility now that they're adults. But Naomi was quick to rebut my words. "Hey lady, don't be like that. We know you have some money stashed away. You got a nest egg for Nate's future, right? That's what Nate told us. We're just asking you to trust us with it." I was taken aback that Naomi, who was essentially a stranger until a minute ago, was so clued up about our family finances. But it was true. I had mentioned saving for Nate's future before. I was amazed he'd spill those beans to her. Now I couldn't just let this slide. "What? I'm under no obligation to hand over my money to you." I got a bit emotional, but she kept going. "But lady, you kinda do have an obligation. Nate stays over at my place since I live alone. My place isn't free. What about rent? Are you planning to just abandon your son as his mom?" She said all this with a touch of arrogance. Fed up and feeling like I was hitting a brick wall, I just wanted this to end. That's when Nate piped up.
Just give me the card for that account you've saved for me, that's all.
His casual remark just added fuel to my fire. I wanted to kick them out right then and there, but I realized that wouldn't resolve anything. So in a moment of exasperation, I handed over the card, with one warning. "But remember, only up to $2,200, okay? It includes Isabella's share too." But Naomi just said, "Okay, got it. You should have done this from the get-go," and gave me this unsettling grin. Then the two of them strutted out of the house like they'd won the lottery. Isabella, who had been watching the whole spectacle, looked concerned and asked, "Is the card going to be okay?" But I chose to stick to my guns. After all, that money was always meant for Nate eventually. I wanted to reassure Isabella and aimed to keep living as if it was business as usual. However, a few days later, Isabella's fears came true. I'd set my card to shoot me an email every time a payment was made. It was my way of keeping track on my phone and where and how much was being spent. One morning I woke up to a barrage of notifications on my phone. More than 10 payments had been made with my card. I was speechless when I saw the amount. What? They've blown through over $14,000? Even though I had given Nate the green light to spend up to $2,200, the amount held nearly $35,000 in total. The bills included flight tickets, designer bags, fancy restaurants, and what looked like a luxury hotel stay. I'm sure they jetted off on their honeymoon and splurged there. I immediately called Nate, but Naomi was the one who picked up. "Oh, hey you. Nate's in the restroom right now, so I took the call," she replied, just as flippant as ever. "Hey, how much did you guys blow? I told you $2,200, didn't I?" She just chuckled and said, "Oh, has it added up to that much? We still have a few things on our wish list, you know, so we're probably going to spend a bit more. Thanks for picking up the tab." Unable to bear it any longer, I called the card company as soon as I hung up and requested them to cancel my card. They informed me the contract was valid until the end of the month, but they could put a stop to the card usage immediately, so I asked them to do just that. If I didn't, they would empty the account. I blocked their numbers and any international calls. I briefed Isabella about what was happening and asked her to do the same. They had to face the music for their actions. I was dead set on showing them what happens when you cross a woman scorned. With a card out of action, they couldn't buy a thing, including their return tickets. Obviously, hotel stays were off the table too. Essentially, I'd left them stranded abroad. My message was clear. Enjoy your trip through hell. Then a few days rolled by. By this time, Nate and his girl should have been back home. But without the means to buy a return ticket, they were stuck abroad, just as I'd planned. Something came up and I sent an email to Nate. "I've unlocked $350 on the card so you could make your way home." The next day, the two of them turned up at my house. It was clear as day they were worn to the bone, both physically and emotionally. But Naomi still had the nerve to snap at me. "Lady, what did you pull? This is beyond messed up. Who in their right mind cancels a card like that?" From the sounds of it, they'd tried to use the card all over the place, but to no avail. They'd apparently gotten so upset, they ended up in the local police station, tossed in something resembling a cell. They were suspected of something and thoroughly searched throughout the day. They must have been scared out of their minds, not knowing what was to come. But in the end, they hadn't actually committed a crime, so they were released the next day. Nowhere to go, stomachs empty, they apparently made their way to the embassy, tears streaming down their faces. Once their identities were confirmed, it seems the US was notified. They were given permission to return home, and that's when my email came in. Somehow they made it back to the US. But even after all that, she was still furious with me and didn't seem to have learned her lesson. But I had a message for her. "Naomi, sweetheart, the only reason you made it home is thanks to your parents. You should be grateful. If this had happened next month, I wouldn't have been able to do a thing. But lying about your parents being dead, they could have cut you off for that. You wouldn't have been able to come back this time if that were the case." At that, she started breaking out in a cold sweat. It seems Nate was in the dark too.
"Wait, her parents are alive? What's happening?"
he asked, eyes wide in shock. For the past few days, I've been getting calls from an unknown number. Normally, I don't answer calls from numbers I don't recognize, but they were so persistent that I picked up. I'm Naomi's mother," she said, sounding remorseful. I was taken aback, but I decided to hear her out. Apparently, Naomi's mom got a call from their vacation spot, and that's how she first got wind of the situation. They'd been trying to reach me from there, but I had blocked international calls, so Naomi's mom got my number from the embassy and pleaded with me to temporarily unblock the card. "I'm so sorry. We'll take responsibility and pay back whatever she spent," she promised, crying her eyes out. Given the circumstances, I reached out to the credit card company once again and had them enable the card up to a limit of $350. It turns out Naomi has been a troublemaker for a while, even running away from home and cutting ties with her parents who tried to warn her. "What the? Stupid adults! How dare you pull something so selfish and hurt us? This is just the worst." Naomi, showing zero remorse, was still ranting, but I wasn't about to let her off easy. Complaining about us being the worst and selfish? I think you're confusing us with yourself. Using someone else's money without their permission is a crime. If you keep this up, next time you'll be dealing with the police. Head back to your parents' house quietly. If you don't listen this time, I'll call the cops right here, right now," I said, all while flashing a chilly smile. That must have spooked her because she bolted from the house without a word to Nate. He tried to stop her, saying,
"Hey, wait up! I'm coming with you."
But Naomi, firing off a parting shot, said, "Shut up! I never want to see you again. You're not worth it. I thought I'd marry you because your parents have money. I have no use for you anymore. You're broke and the worst." And with that, she vanished from sight. He seemed to have a serious soft spot for her.
"What? Are you serious? What about our marriage?"
And he just crumpled to his knees. Watching him, his sister Isabella chimed in. "I warned you she was bad news. You fell for it all, and you didn't even realize it. You're pretty clueless, huh?" She was seriously flabbergasted. In the end, Naomi apparently bolted straight to her parents' place. Guess she didn't want another run-in with the law. But her folks really laid into her, and it seems they even threw down a challenge. Naomi, unable to make it back from her overseas trip as planned, was MIA from work for a few days without any heads-up. With her already infamous track record, this little stunt was apparently the last straw and she was let go. So her parents pulled some strings and found her a gig at a live-in facility run by a friend of theirs. Word is, it's a super tough place that keeps you busy with manual labor from dawn till dusk. They keep a close eye on her, so there's no chance of her skipping town. It's a bit like a prison, but at least the pay isn't half bad.
"Your mother and I will foot the $20,000 bill you racked up, but you'll have to buckle down and pay us back," her parents apparently told her in no uncertain terms. That's what happens when you refuse to learn from your mistakes. Last I heard, she's still working her tail off. Nate, too, apparently lost his job due to his no-shows. In one fell swoop, he lost his fiancée and his job, and yet he doesn't seem the least bit repentant. He came to me again with his hand out saying, "I'm in debt because I splurged on her."
Honestly, I don't know what to do with him, my own flesh and blood. But I've made up my mind not to give him another penny, so I told him, "Pack up, leave our house, and find a job. Earn your own money, pay off your debts, or else you'll be taken for a ride by another gold digger." I held my ground and kicked him out. Even as his mom, I had to do it, or else I couldn't stand it anymore. It'll serve as a good lesson for him. Now he's managed to scrape together enough to rent a rundown apartment, and it seems he's working from morning till night, slowly chipping away at his debt. As for me, I finally found some peace. Isabella is doing great, climbing the corporate ladder at a top-tier firm. She treated me to a fancy dinner with her first paycheck and introduced me to her incredible boyfriend. It was a reminder of what a wonderful daughter she is. Now that she has moved out, I have the house to myself. But I've found new hobbies and I'm enjoying my occasional downtime. Life is good.